I was sitting alone in my small apartment in Portland, Oregon on a quiet autumn evening when I found a strange letter in my mailbox. No return address, just my name written carefully by hand. I opened it and read the words that would change everything. Son, we need to talk. Your parents are ready to explain. I had waited 20 years for this moment, but now that it arrived, I did not know if I still wanted to hear it. They said they were not ready to be parents when they left me, but then they went on to have 6 more children. Before I begin this story, let me know where you are watching from today. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have not already. Now, let me take you back 20 years and show you how I grew up without knowing my birth parents, and what happened when they suddenly came back into my life. The story of how I came into this world is not a happy one. I was born in a small hospital in Sacramento, California on a cold January morning. My birth parents. Derek and Pamela were only 19 years old at the time. They were high school sweethearts who found themselves facing an unexpected pregnancy during their freshman year of college. According to the records I obtained years later, they stayed in the hospital for exactly 3 days after I was born. On the 3rd day, they signed the papers that would give up their parental rights forever. The reason they wrote on the form was simple and devastating. We are not ready to be parents. We are too young. I often try to imagine what those 3 days were like. Did they hold me? Did they look into my eyes and wonder what kind of person I would become? Did they cry when they signed those papers? Or did they feel relieved? These are questions that haunted me for most of my life. Questions that never had answers. After my birth parents walked away, I became a ward of the state of California. I spent the first 18 months of my life in an orphanage in Sacramento. The social workers told me later that I was a quiet baby. I rarely cried, rarely demanded attention. Maybe some part of me already understood that crying would not bring anyone running. Maybe I learned too early that I had to take care of myself. When I was 18 months old, everything changed. A couple from Eugene, Oregon drove all the way down to Sacramento to meet me. Their names were Harold and Margaret Thompson. They were in their early 50s with gray hair and kind eyes. They had never been able to have children of their own, and after decades of marriage, they decided to open their home to a child who needed one. I do not remember the day they took me home, but I have seen the photographs. Margaret holding me in her arms, tears streaming down her face. Harold standing beside her with his hand on my head, smiling wider than I had ever seen anyone smile. They looked at me like I was the greatest gift they had ever received. The Thompson home was a modest farmhouse on the outskirts of Eugene. It sat on 3 acres of land with an apple orchard in the back and a small vegetable garden on the side. The house itself was old but well-maintained with creaky wooden floors and windows that let in the morning sun. Every Sunday morning, the smell of Margaret's homemade apple pie would fill the entire house. That smell still brings tears to my eyes when I encounter it today. Harold was a retired electrician who spent his days tinkering with old radios and fishing in the nearby river. He had rough hands and a gentle voice. He taught me how to bait a hook, how to change a tire, how to fix a leaky faucet. He taught me what it meant to be a man, not through lectures or lessons, but through the way he lived his life. He showed me that a real man takes care of his family, keeps his promises, and treats everyone with respect. Margaret was a former elementary school teacher who had retired early due to health problems. She had a bad heart, the doctor said, but you would never know it from the way she lived. She read to me every single night before bed. She taught me to love books to find escape and adventure in their pages. She made me believe that I could become anything I wanted to be if I worked hard enough. For a while, I was happy, truly happy. I had a home, 2 people who loved me unconditionally, and a life that felt safe and stable. But there was always something missing. A question that lived in the back of my mind, growing louder as I got older. I was 5 years old when I first learned the truth about my origins. I was playing in the living room when I heard Harold and Margaret talking in the kitchen. They did not know I was listening. Margaret said something about my birth parents, about how she hoped I would never have to know the full story. Harold agreed, saying it was better this way. I did not understand everything they said, but I understood enough to know that the people who gave me life were not the people who raised me. I confronted them that night. With the innocent directness that only a 5-year-old possesses, I asked them point blank, "Am I adopted?" Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Harold pulled me onto his lap and explained in words simple enough for a child to understand that my birth parents were not able to take care of me. But that did not mean I was not loved. That did not mean I was not wanted. They chose me, he said. Out of all the children in the world, they chose me. For a few years, that explanation was enough. But as I grew older, the questions multiplied. Why were they not able to take care of me? What was wrong with me that made them leave? Did they ever think about me? Did they ever regret their decision? I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, creating elaborate fantasies about my birth parents. Maybe they were secret agents who had to give me up to protect me. Maybe they were tragically killed in an accident, and that was why they could not raise me. Anything was better than the truth that they simply did not want me. By the time I reached middle school, the questions had transformed into something darker. I began to struggle with feelings of worthlessness. I had trouble making friends because I always felt like an outsider. I kept a journal where I wrote letters to my birth parents. Letters I would never send because I did not know where to send them. Letters full of anger and hurt and desperate pleas for answers. Why did you leave me? What did I do wrong? Do you ever think about me? Harold and Margaret did their best to help me through these difficult years. They were patient and understanding. They reminded me constantly that I was loved, that I was wanted, that I belonged. But there was a wound inside me that their love could not fully heal. A wound that only the people who inflicted it could address. The year I turned 16 changed everything. It was 2015, and social media had become a part of everyday life. One evening, driven by a curiosity I could no longer suppress, I sat down at my computer and began to search. I typed in the names I had memorized from the adoption papers I had secretly found in Harold's desk drawer: Derek Morrison and Pamela Harrington. The search results were overwhelming. There were dozens of people with those names across the country. I spent hours narrowing down the possibilities, cross-referencing locations and ages until I found something that made my heart stop. A Facebook profile for a woman named Pamela Morrison. Maiden name Harrington, living in Sacramento, California. I clicked on the profile with trembling fingers. The profile picture showed a smiling woman in her late 30s standing in front of a beautiful house. Beside her was a man I assumed was her husband. And surrounding them, captured in that single frozen moment, were 6 children. I counted them 3 times to make sure I was not seeing things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 children ranging in age from what looked like 3 years old to about 15. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. My birth mother, the woman who said she was not ready to be a parent now, had 6 children. 6 children she apparently was ready to raise. 6 children who grew up in that beautiful house with their parents who loved them. 6 children who had everything I never had. I scrolled through years of posts and photographs. There were pictures from family vacations to Disneyland and the Grand Canyon. Birthday parties with elaborate themes and dozens of guests. Christmas mornings with mountains of presents under a perfectly decorated tree. Soccer games and dance recitals and graduations. A perfect family living a perfect life. One post in particular destroyed me. It was from the previous Mother's Day. Pamela had written a long tribute to her experience as a mother. The caption read, "Being a mom is the greatest blessing of my life. These 6 amazing humans have taught me more about love and sacrifice than I ever could have imagined. I cannot picture my life without them." I read those words over and over again. She could not picture her life without them. But she had no trouble picturing her life without me. I was the one she could live without. I was the one she could forget. I was the one who was not worth keeping. I did more research. I discovered that Derek and Pamela had gotten married just 2 years after they abandoned me. Their first child together, a girl named Stephanie, was born a year after the wedding. That meant when I was only 3 years old, living in foster care and wondering why nobody wanted me, they were starting the family they claimed they were not ready for. Every 2 or 3 years after that, they had another child. Each one welcomed with joy and celebration. Each one given the life that should have been mine. That night, I cried harder than I had ever cried in my life. I locked myself in my room and sobbed into my pillow until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen shut. I did not understand how the world could be so cruel. How could they give me away because they were too young and then immediately start having more children? Was it really about being young and unprepared? Or was it about me specifically? Was there something about me that they rejected? I never told Harold and Margaret what I discovered. I could not bear to see the hurt in their eyes. They had given me everything they had, and I was terrified that talking about my birth parents would feel like a betrayal of their love. So I buried the pain deep inside and tried to move forward. But I was not the same after that night. Something fundamental had broken inside me. My grades began to slip. I stopped participating in class and started spending more time alone. I pushed away the few friends I had convinced that they would eventually abandon me too. Everyone leaves eventually, I thought. Better to push them away first than to wait for the inevitable. The following year brought even more pain. Harold, the only father I had ever known, collapsed one morning while working in the apple orchard. I was at school when Margaret called me, her voice shaking with fear. By the time I got to the hospital, it was too late. Harold had suffered a massive heart attack. He was 68 years old. I remember standing in the hospital hallway, unable to move, unable to think. The man who taught me how to fish, how to fix things, how to be a man was gone. And I never got to tell him how much he meant to me. I never got to thank him for choosing me when my own parents would not. Margaret deteriorated quickly after Harold's death. She had always had a weak heart, and losing her husband of 45 years seemed to accelerate her decline. She tried to stay strong for me, but I could see her fading away. I took on more responsibilities around the house, cooking meals and helping with bills. I grew up faster than any teenager should have to. Through all of this, the resentment I felt toward my birth parents grew stronger. If they had not abandoned me, I thought maybe my life would have been different. Maybe I would have had a stable home from the beginning. Maybe I would not have had to watch the only parents I knew grow old and die while I was still just a kid. The anger became a constant companion, a fire burning in my chest that never went out. I graduated from high school 2 months after my 18th birthday. Margaret was there in the audience, frail but determined. She cried when I walked across the stage to receive my diploma. I cried too, wishing Harold could have been there to see it. I had been accepted to a community college in Portland, where I planned to study electrical engineering. Harold had always encouraged my interest in how things worked, and I wanted to honor his memory by pursuing a career in the field he had loved. Margaret supported my decision, even though it meant I would be moving 4 hours away. The goodbye was harder than I expected. Margaret stood on the porch of our farmhouse, waving as I loaded my car with boxes of clothes and books. She looked so small, standing there, so fragile. I promised to call every day. I promised to visit every month. I promised I would never forget everything she and Harold had done for me. I kept those promises for 2 years. And then, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, Margaret passed away in her sleep. The doctors said her heart simply gave out. I think it was more than that. I think she had been ready to go ever since Harold died, and she was just holding on long enough to make sure I would be okay on my own. Losing Margaret felt like losing my last anchor to the world. I was 20 years old, completely alone with no family left to call my own. The farmhouse was sold to pay off debts, and all the possessions I could not fit in my car were donated or thrown away. I watched strangers carry out the furniture I had grown up with, the books Margaret used to read to me, the tools Harold used to teach me about repair and craftsmanship. My entire childhood reduced to a few boxes in the back of a Honda Civic. I threw myself into my studies and my work. I graduated from community college and got a job with a power company in Portland. I rented a small one-bedroom apartment on the east side of the city. I lived simply saving money and keeping to myself. I did not make many friends. I did not date. I woke up, went to work, came home, and went to sleep. Day after day, month after month, year after year. I told myself I was content. I told myself I had moved past the pain of my childhood. I told myself I did not need anyone else to be happy. But late at night, when the city was quiet and I was alone with my thoughts, the old questions would resurface. Why did they leave me? What was wrong with me? Would I ever feel like I truly belonged somewhere? 5 years passed in this routine, and then on an ordinary autumn evening when I was 25 years old, I found the letter in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name, Rosetta, written in careful handwriting I did not recognize. Inside was a 2-page letter from Pamela Morrison, my birth mother, the woman who had given me up and then built a beautiful family without me. Her words were carefully chosen, almost rehearsed. She apologized for the past. She said that she and Derek had made a terrible mistake all those years ago. She said they had thought about me every day since and regretted their decision more than I could ever know. She invited me to Sacramento for Derek's 60th birthday party. She said the whole family would be there. She said my siblings were eager to meet their older brother. She wrote, "We know we can never make up for the years we lost, but we are ready now. We are ready to welcome you home." I read that letter at least 20 times. Each reading brought a different emotion. Anger, confusion, sadness, hope, suspicion. I did not know what to feel or what to do. Part of me wanted to throw the letter away and pretend it never existed. Another part of me wanted to drive to Sacramento immediately and demand the answers I had been seeking my entire life. I thought about it for a week. I barely slept. I could not focus at work. I kept pulling out the letter and reading it again, searching for some hidden meaning in the words. In the end, I made a decision. I would go to Sacramento, not to forgive them, not to become part of their family, but to finally get the answers I deserved. To look them in the eye and ask the question that had defined my existence: why the drive from Portland to Sacramento took nearly 10 hours. I left before dawn on a Saturday morning and arrived in the late afternoon. As I drove through the suburbs where my birth parents lived, I noticed how different it was from the neighborhood where I grew up. The houses were bigger here, with manicured lawns and expensive cars in the driveways. This was the life they had built after giving me away. This was what they chose over me. The Morrison house was exactly as it appeared in the Facebook photos. A large 2-story home with a perfectly maintained garden and a swimming pool visible in the backyard. There were balloons and streamers decorating the front porch. Cars lined the street, evidence of the many guests who had come to celebrate Derek's birthday. I sat in my car for 15 minutes before I found the courage to walk up to the front door. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. My hands were shaking. Every instinct told me to turn around and drive back to Portland. But I had come too far to run away now. Pamela answered the door. She was older than in her photos, with gray streaks in her hair and lines around her eyes. But she was unmistakably the woman from the Facebook profile. The woman who gave birth to me and then gave me away. She burst into tears the moment she saw me. She threw her arms around me and held on tight, sobbing into my shoulder. I stood there stiffly, my arms at my sides, not sure how to respond. This woman was a stranger to me. Her embrace felt foreign and uncomfortable. Derek appeared behind her, a tall man with thinning hair and a nervous smile. He shook my hand and welcomed me inside. The house was full of people, relatives, and friends I did not know and would probably never see again. Everyone stared at me as I walked through the living room. I could hear whispers following me. That's the one they gave up. I can't believe he actually came. He looks just like Derek. The 6 children were there too, my biological siblings. They ranged in age from 10 to 22. The oldest, Stephanie, looked at me with something like guilt in her eyes. The youngest, a boy named Marcus, seemed confused about who I was and why I was there. It became clear that most of them had only recently learned of my existence. Pamela had kept me a secret for over 2 decades. The party continued around me, but I felt like a ghost haunting the edges of the celebration. People tried to talk to me, to include me in conversations, but I could not focus on anything they said. I was watching Derek and Pamela studying their interactions with their other children. The easy affection, the inside jokes, the shared history. Everything I had been denied. After about an hour, Derek pulled me aside. He led me out to the backyard, away from the noise of the party. We sat by the pool, the water reflecting the fading sunlight. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Derek began to explain. He told me that when Pamela got pregnant with me, they panicked. They were young, broke, and terrified. They had their whole lives ahead of them, dreams they wanted to pursue. A baby did not fit into those plans, so they made what he called a pragmatic decision. They gave me up so they could live the lives they wanted. 2 years later, everything changed. They finished college, got good jobs, and got married. They bought a house. They felt stable. They felt ready. So they decided to start a family. The right way this time, Derek said, with intention and planning. I listened to his explanation with growing disbelief. He spoke about my abandonment like it was a business decision, a calculated move to optimize their life outcomes. There was no acknowledgement of the pain they caused. No real understanding of what they had done. Then he said something that broke the last thread of hope I had been holding on to. He looked at me with what he probably thought was compassion and said, "You were a mistake of our youth. But now we have a chance to fix things. We can make up for lost time." A mistake. That is what I was to them. A mistake to be corrected, a problem to be solved. Not a child who needed love. Not a person who mattered. Just an inconvenient error from their past that they were finally ready to address. Something inside me shifted in that moment. The anger I had carried for 20 years suddenly had somewhere to go. I stood up from my chair and faced the man who was supposed to be my father. I looked him directly in the eyes and spoke the truth I had been holding inside my entire life. I told him about growing up in the foster system, wondering every day why nobody wanted me. I told him about Harold and Margaret, the 2 people who actually raised me, who loved me without condition, who gave me everything, even though I was not their blood. I told him about the nights I cried myself to sleep, about the journals full of letters I wrote to parents who would never read them, about the years of therapy I would need to undo the damage their decision caused. I told him that he did not abandon me because he was not ready. He abandoned me because he was selfish, because he valued his comfort and his freedom more than his own child. And then I told him something that surprised even me. I told him I did not need him anymore. I said, "I am not a mistake. I am a person who deserved to be loved, and you refused to give me that love. Harold and Margaret gave me what you never could. They are my real parents. You are just the people who gave me up." I turned and walked back through the house. Pamela tried to stop me at the door, pleading for me to stay to give them a chance. Derek offered money support, whatever I needed. I declined everything. I told them I had built my own life, and I did not need them to complete it. I got in my car and drove away without looking back. The drive home was the longest 10 hours of my life. I pulled over twice just to cry. Not tears of sadness, but tears of release. For 20 years, I had carried the weight of my abandonment like a boulder on my back. For 20 years, I had wondered what was wrong with me, why I was not good enough. And now I finally understood the truth: there was nothing wrong with me. The problem had always been them. That realization did not erase the pain, but it changed the nature of it. I was no longer a victim of my own perceived inadequacy. I was a survivor of their selfishness, and survivors can heal. In the weeks following my trip to Sacramento, I made some important changes. I found a therapist who specialized in adoption trauma. For the first time in my life, I talked openly about my feelings of abandonment and worthlessness. I learned that these feelings were not unique to me, that thousands of adoptees struggle with the same questions, the same doubts, the same wounds. I was not alone. I also started reaching out more to the people around me. I joined a recreational basketball league at the community center. I volunteered at a local food bank on weekends. I allowed myself to form connections with people, even though a part of me was still afraid of being left behind. At one of the community center events, I met a woman named Meredith. She was a kindergarten teacher with a warm smile and an easy laugh. We started talking about books, discovered we both loved science fiction, and exchanged numbers. What began as friendship slowly developed into something deeper. Meredith had her own difficult past. She grew up with a single mother who battled addiction. She understood what it meant to feel abandoned, to question your own worth. We did not fix each other, but we supported each other. We gave each other space to be broken and time to heal. A few months after my confrontation with Derek and Pamela, I received an unexpected message on Facebook. It was from Audrey, my youngest biological sister, now 18, and starting her first year of college. She wrote that she was sorry for what her parents did to me. She said she had always sensed something was not quite right about their family, some secret that nobody talked about. When she learned about me, everything suddenly made sense. Audrey wanted to know me, not as a replacement for our parents, but as a brother. She understood that I had no interest in a relationship with Derek and Pamela, and she respected that boundary. She just wanted to connect with the siblings she never knew she had. I agreed to meet her cautiously at first. We got coffee at a shop near her campus. She was nervous, and so was I. But as we talked, I saw that she was different from our parents. She had empathy and genuine curiosity. She asked questions about my life without making assumptions. She listened more than she spoke. We have slowly built a relationship over the past year. It is not always easy. Sometimes being around her reminds me of everything I lost. But it also shows me that family can be complicated, that connections can form in unexpected places. I have not spoken to Derek or Pamela since that night at the birthday party. I doubt I ever will. But Audrey has become someone I am glad to know. These days, I keep a photograph of Harold and Margaret on my desk at work. It was taken at my high school graduation, the last time we were all together. Looking at it reminds me of where I came from and who helped me get here. They may not have been my birth parents, but they were my real parents in every way that mattered. I have learned that family is not defined by blood. It is defined by love, by commitment, by the choice to show up for someone day after day, even when it is hard. Harold and Margaret chose me when my birth parents would not. They gave me a foundation that allowed me to survive the truth about my origins. They showed me what real love looks like. I have also learned that forgiveness is not required for healing. I do not forgive Derek and Pamela for what they did. What they did was wrong, and nothing can change that. But I have stopped letting their decision define me. I have stopped asking what was wrong with me, and started accepting that the flaw was in them. That shift, as simple as it sounds, has changed everything. So here I am, 25 years old, still figuring things out. I have a job, I enjoy a woman I love, and a sister I am getting to know. I have scars that will never fully disappear, but I also have strength I did not know I possessed. I am not a mistake. I am not unwanted. I am someone who was thrown away and chose to rebuild himself piece by piece. If you are watching this and you have experienced something similar, I want you to know that you are not alone. The rejection of a parent is one of the deepest wounds a person can carry, but it does not have to define your future. You can create your own family. You can find your own purpose. You can write your own story. Sometimes the people who abandon you accidentally lead you to the people who love you most. Harold and Margaret found me because Derek and Pamela let me go. In a strange way, that is the one thing I can thank my birth parents for. Their worst decision became my greatest blessing. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to confront someone from your past to find closure? How did it change you? Share your story in the comments below. If this video touched you in any way, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who might need to hear it. Your support means more than you know. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it brought you some comfort, some insight, or simply reminded you that you are worthy of love no matter where you came from. Take care of yourselves and remember the family you choose is just as real as the family you were born into.